Hey everyone, Harry here to talk about Justice Juan Merchan's decision to put off the sentencing of Trump and as well his immunity ruling in the New York case, the sole case that has a criminal case that's gone to trial in which Trump was convicted of 34 counts. By now, this has been well reported. It happened late on Friday. Merchan issued a 4-page order. And I guess I'll start here because there's an interesting diversity of opinion, I think you could say, among the sort of pundit types. I had a conversation. I'll be coming to a YouTube and Talking Feds Near You with Preet Bharara, a very respected, the U.S. attorney, former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. And he basically was supportive. He said, come on, it's really a phony aspiration as opposed to something that really has practical application, this idea that we treat Trump the same as every defendant. And it makes, sense to really keep this from interfering with the election. That's how I saw it. And he's a good, aggressive prosecutor, and SDNY, he's really was involved in cases like this. And there's a number of people on that side. Count me as on the other side for a few reasons. Count me as being on the other side. I think he would have been better served to go with the still at the time on the calendar dates of September 18th and for September 16th for the immunity. I want to talk a little bit about his opinion, and then I will get back to my thoughts about what should have happened. It's a kind of remarkable 4-page opinion. You've had Merchan's. I was at the trial. He was really a steady hand on the till. He definitely called certain things for Trump. He was not in any way bending toward the state, and he really seemed to be wearing, there's a famous statue of Justice, a woman on scales with blinders over her eyes, which signifies that you do justice without regard, without fear or favor, without regard to the identity of the defendant. And that's what he did during the trial, it seemed to me. Obviously, there were some practical things you had to acknowledge, like the security and clearing the room at different points. But really, otherwise, that was his North Star. That's also been the North Star. And there was a marked contrast last week with Judge Tanya Chutkan. She is overseeing the January 6th case, which has now been returned to her after the long detour in the Supreme Court, while they prepared and delivered their atom bomb of a hydrogen bomb of an immunity opinion. But the case now came back to her, and Trump's attorney actually said, look, we can't do anything. There's an election coming up very soon. They sort of tiptoed around that, but then made that point. And Chutkan, as she's done all the way through, said, I'm not paying any attention to election. I'm paying attention to a 4-count criminal indictment. That's the approach Merchan had largely taken, and it was a very notable departure from it. And his opinion is really unusual. You can kind of hear him wrestling with himself and saying, I certainly would never change my thoughts just because he's a president, but this is a unique situation in our nation's history, and it's fraught with peril and, the possibility of getting all bollocksed up in the politics. And, as you're reading it, you almost think, he at the end, he could go either way. And then he, announces at the end. So for there to be no possible charge of in any way messing with the election, I'm going to give Trump what he asks for and move this sentence now to November 26th after the election, although very possibly not after the tussling over the election, but after all votes have been cast. Okay, so first, pretty big victory for Trump, and notwithstanding the general low level and even sort of brazenness of his lawyering, which have really, his substantive claims and defenses have basically fallen flat one after the other and even produced the sort of contempt of judges. On what you have to say is his number one lookout that he's really been fighting for a year. And that would be, don't let anything happen before the election, and then hope to win the election, and from there, it'll take care of itself. That's been his strategy, and we now come to the election, and except for the conviction itself a few months back, there'll be no accountability, right? This was the last thing that had Mayor Chun looked it over and said, here's the sentence I pronounce. Trump wouldn't have served it. Let's say he announces a 2 or 3 month incarceratory sentence. There's a lot of discussion and debate. We'll be covering it later about whether that would happen or now will happen. But it was that Trump feared and loathed. It was even in his papers, the irreparable reputational harm. And so you can't do it. Had he done it, it would have been and again, it wouldn't be a new ruling. It would be just following through on the conviction. That would have been, a pretty big hit before the election. And now there'll be no hits. He's got a combination of luck and fortuity and judges who love him. So, Cannon has dismissed the case. That's not coming back before. Chutkin had it wrested from her by the Supreme Court, and she set a schedule that nothing's going to happen before. This is New York. Now nothing's going to happen before. And Fulton County is, somewhere very, very deep in the mothballs. Okay. So why do I say he should have followed through? Just in this situation, the courts have been really flummoxed and uncertain at different points. But everyone who has said, okay, I'm not going to change my ways. There have been times where courts have been actually pushed to accelerate things a little in order to have the trial or things happen before the election, and they've declined that. And so even if you say, as Preet Bharara says, let's not pretend that he's not special, not different, etc., the question still becomes, well, so how does that cut? Does that mean you could as well say that the voters, in order to be well informed, that cuts in the direction of giving them this information, which is going to happen anyway. He's going to be sentenced now. He's special. He's special not because of his haircut or his, candidacy. He's special because the American people have a vested interest in knowing about him, knowing about the election and the like. So even for two reasons, I think, Mayor Chun, very fine trial judge, but he blinked, I think, and it's unfortunate. The first reason is, in difficult decisions like this, it matters so much to know your principle, know what you're about, draw the line and stick with it. Chutkin has done that. And what's the line? Having blinders, as Lady Justice does, for the political and outside world considerations. And then second, there were very strong countervailing views that it's all the more reason, if you're being sensitive to the political framework and the election coming up, that you should do it. But, he got, it's certainly not that he, I think was browbeaten by Trump or whatever, but I think he flinched, and the thing he was most worried about is being said to have influenced the election in any way, to, put his thumb on. But of course, he was in a position where thumb off, thumb on, it doesn't matter. The influence was going to occur. Now the influence is in Trump's favor, to the chagrin of many, especially, Trump haters, but that's not the point. The point is, in that sort of situation, the right way to go is not indulge either political influence and rather just stick with treating him as you would any other person. And his sentencing has been put off a while. He was put off for the immunity case properly, but now really it was time. Instead, it will be around Thanksgiving. One more point that I mentioned briefly, but it really figures in his opinion, which is the DA decided not to make a recommendation, and indeed even supplied some reasons why maybe no recommendation, maybe it made sense to postpone. That was kind of a weenie-ish move, I think. So Bragg himself didn't want to be on the line, but a judge in that situation looks to a prosecutor to support him. I mean, there's nothing untoward about that. Same thing like on appeal. The judge looks to the prosecutor who has ever won to really advocate for that position on appeal. And if the prosecution had come forward and said justice requires some of the arguments I'm making, it would have, I think, made it a less lonely prospect. And that opinion is really remarkable in its loneliness. You can really see and feel him, not sure what to do, feeling lonely about it, and then coming down in favor of postponing. One more point that's been raised that's I think a pretty good one. We couldn't have known exactly, but Trump wouldn't have given up if Mayor Chun would have just stayed the course. He would have found some way to get, or tried ever, and you can get cases. You can just claim an emergency. He would have tried very hard, and maybe with success, to get some extraordinary motion for a stay before the U.S. Supreme Court, going quickly up the ladder, as you do, say, in a death penalty case, saying that, this is such an emergency and so unique in our nation's history. And it's very possible that the Supreme Court would have, that 5 members would have just granted a stay. And maybe Mayor Chun was even thinking about that, right? Maybe he would say, I'd rather do it myself than have it look that, I've been forced to do it by the Supreme Court. So that maybe figures in as well. Anyway, so that's the kind of broad and complex set of considerations. The bottom line, Donald Trump will have no sort of information validated by courts other than the conviction itself for people to look to. One other thing you might say, it's arguable also, you want a judge not to even think about these things, but it's arguable that come November 26th, there's no skittishness about sentencing a guy who is who's running for president, because either he will have won, and at that point, the case isn't dead, things will happen, but all bets are off, and there'll be all kinds of push to keep things on ice while he's president, or he will have lost. And at that point, arguably, Mayor Chun would be, emboldened and uncowed to just say, now it really is a simple citizen in front of me. Here's the sentence you receive, maybe less skittish about a short-term incarceratory sentence, although that is in a context that would have no influence on really what is, if you're thinking in these terms, the most important point, which is the existential issue, arguably, about whether Trump wins this election and proceeds to take a sledgehammer to the U.S. Constitution. Okay, so there you have it. Stay tuned for November 26th, but by then we'll have much bigger news that we'll still be digesting one way or another. If he loses, that'll be something people will really be focused on. And the whole question of, in other cases, they will also, most of them are not going away in one fashion or another. So a loss for him really has grave implications for his liberty. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.